Well, good evening, everyone. We're grateful to everyone who's come out on this not very pleasant night. I'm John Crook. I'm the Vice President of the Society. I'm not David Caron. But in David's absence, it's my great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Society, Betsy, all of the members of the Society staff who are here, for a very special occasion, marking the nomination of our friend and colleague, Professor Sean Murphy, for election to the International Court of Justice.
Well, that would be nice.
5 years. 5 years.
I was looking. We've now established that people are listening. Good thing. David Caron is not able to be with us today and asked me to read a message of congratulations, which I'm pleased to do. David regrets that he's not able to be with us tonight to join in celebrating the nomination of Sean Murphy to the International Law Commission. David got it correct. I am in Istanbul for discussion of current challenges to the regime of straits, a topic for which a foundational study was undertaken in the early 1950s by the ILC under its first chair, Manly O. Hudson. I did not have the pleasure to know Hudson, although he stands in the collective memory of the American society as an individual of singular importance. I have had the privilege to know many of his successors. I first met Steve Schwabel while he was at the International Court, worked with George Aldrich, several matters at the Iran U.S. Claims Tribunal, followed every step of my fellow Berkeley alum Steve McCaffrey's great successes, hosted Robert Rosenstock on several occasions at Berkeley, and watched with great admiration the acumen and dedication that Michael Matheson brought to the Commission. Each of these individuals manifest the qualities most valued by the American society: brilliance, care, learning, and service. Their careers set a standard of which we are proud. And I can think of no one more likely to continue this tradition of an example than my friend, Sean Murphy. Professor Murphy always demonstrates scholarship of the highest order, meticulous attention to detail, clarity in his writing, and integrity of mind necessary in a great scholar and a global public servant. Sean, says our president, congratulations. I join all present in knowing that the strength and wisdom of the International Law Commission will be even more luminous with you as a member. As a lowly vice president of the Society, I get to echo David's words. Appreciation of our friend and colleague Sean Murphy on the occasion of his nomination for election to the ILC. Sean's had a notable career, a notable and unusual set of accomplishments. As David noted, he has a superb reputation as a scholar, but he also has a remarkable body of experience as a practitioner and advocate. I'm going to take just a few minutes to comment on Sean's quite extraordinary qualifications. You all know that he's the Patricia Roberts Harris Research Professor of Law at GW Law, where he's been a respected member of the faculty since 1998. His bachelor's is from Catholic University, his JD from Columbia, LLM from Cambridge, his doctorate from the University of Virginia. Prior to joining the GW faculty, many of us got to know Sean as he served with distinction in various legal positions in the Office of the Legal Advisor for over a decade, including years of distinguished service in The Hague as the U.S. agent, as the U.S. legal counselor in the embassy and agent to the Iran Tribunal. During this time, he somehow managed to combine both active and challenging practice with some serious scholarship, including an article that won the American Society's Dayak Prize for the best work by a young scholar, and his notable and prize-winning 1996 book on humanitarian intervention. Now, as a scholar, we all know that Sean has published widely in international law. For me, a striking aspect of his work is the breadth of the subjects that he tackles. As those of us who dabble in academia know, a lot of international law scholarship today is dominated by work that is ever narrower, ever more theoretical, often far removed from the realities and the needs of practice. Sean's writing is different. It spans the whole range of international law, always informed by understanding that international law is law, to be treated with rigor and respect. I'm going to read you one MASH note for one of Sean's many publications, his notable principles of international law. An unsolicited review, I assume not written by Sean, describes this work. The explanations are clear and concise. The organization of the book is flawless. Professor Murphy is perhaps the most brilliant legal mind in the area, and so it is no wonder that his book is top-notch. And the same could be said of all his other work. He co-authors with Judge Bergenthal, every student's, and I have to confess, every practitioner's secret crutch, the nutshell. His 2-volume United States Practice series, based on his years of doing contemporary practice for the American Journal. His notable book on humanitarian intervention, a couple of notable case books, and I'm sure I've left out many other things. As a teacher, Sean is greatly liked and respected by his students. I think his approach to the job of teaching was illustrated one day a few months ago. I walked into his office early in the class. He was intently preparing, poring over a seating chart with 60 faces on it, trying to attach names to the faces. And I think his dedication to his students is well known and appreciated. I'd like to close, though, by stressing one other aspect, which is Sean's experience as a counselor and an advocate. Sean has a unique career blending the life of an academic and the life of a practicing counselor and advocate. He's had a quite distinguished career of representation before the International Court of Justice, both during his time with the U.S. government, but also subsequently in his representation of Kosovo in the Kosovo Advisory Opinion case, most recently in his involvement in the case of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia versus Greece, and there are probably others that I don't even know about. My own experience with Sean as an advocate came from the time when we were involved in the proceedings of the Ethiopia-Eritrea Claims Commission, where he was an extraordinary advocate for Ethiopia in those proceedings. I think all of us on the commission looked forward to his presentations, knowing that they would be well-reasoned, thorough, but also that they would be impeccably honest in their use of authorities. I'll conclude with an observation or two about Sean as a person. We all know, those of us who have had the pleasure of working with him, know what an exceptionally nice person he is, a person of consistent courtesy and good cheer, even at 2 o'clock in the morning, and one who's earned the respect and affection of all those who have worked with him. We all wish Sean the best in his impending elections. We know that after his election, he will make lasting contributions to the International Law Commission, as he's done in all of his other endeavors. So, Sean, we all join in wishing you the best. I'm now going to pass the podium to a man who really needs no introduction, the distinguished legal advisor of the U.S. Department of State, who have a few additional remarks, Dean Harold H. Coe.
John, and thank you to the members of the American Society for International Law for hosting this event, particularly to President David Caron, Vice President John Crook, Executive Director Betsy Anderson, for your extraordinary contributions to the relationship between the United States and international law. And it is in that spirit of engagement and mutual respect and support that the United States has put forward the nomination of Professor Sean Murphy to be a member of the International Law Commission. I've had the good fortune in my lifetime to have known every single U.S. citizen who has served on the International Law Commission. I first heard of the International Law Commission when I was 3 years old. The reason was that my father was a student, a dissertation student of Manly Hudson. And to my father's view, the International Law Commission was one of the most important organizations for the codification and progressive development of international law. He was so impressed by Professor Hudson that he even proposed to my mother that I be named Manly. She declined, thus saving me decades of psychotherapy. The others who have followed in that tradition, including our friend and colleague Mike Matheson, have done extraordinary service and given voice to the American viewpoint on international law within the important work of the International Law Commission. As you may know, for the last few years we have been in the unfortunate situation of not having an American member, and so we took the occasion of the next nomination, Sean's nomination, with great care. We hosted a conference to discuss the state of the International Law Commission, its future development. My colleague Darren Johnson prepared all of us to think about some of the issues that are before the Commission, the reports that are emerging, some of the challenges that it faces. And internally, we had a long series of discussions with members of the international law community about who an ideal American member might be if such a member could be elected. And we decided that that person should have a number of attributes. First, intellectual integrity and accomplishment. Someone who is a renowned teacher and scholar in international law, widely versed in all of the different fields of international law, public and private, and with real practical experience in each of those areas. Second, someone who understands the concerns of government but is not captured by any government, who would have spent time working for his or her national government, but would have spent time representing other governments as well as non-governmental entities, and understand how international law and the practice of international law plays into their concerns. Third, someone who speaks about international law not simply from the perspective of theory, but from the perspective of practice, indeed who studies the practice of states and international law and can understand what developments are driven by opinio juris and will indeed become part of customary international law, perhaps then ought to be the subject of International Law Commission studies, and then furthermore, then become the subject of international treaties. And just as important, those topics which should not be subjects of customary international law or a subject of International Law Commission studies. We further thought that the candidate should be someone who is persuasive, because the International Law Commission is a collegial body that has debate back and forth. It needs to be someone who people can respect, can like, will listen to seriously, will know that they are being listened to. We also thought it should be someone with an extraordinary work ethic, because it requires spending the summers in Geneva, working with great care and integrity through detailed and complicated documents, who can engage on substance, and by engaging on substance, nevertheless maintain the overall vision. And it should be somebody who is able to communicate with all of the relevant communities of international law, both in the United States and elsewhere. Someone who knows the legal advisor's office well enough to be able to communicate with us, knows the academic community well enough to engage with them, who has taught and spoken and addressed the practitioner community well enough that they would also listen to his voice. After this set of criteria, we determined that there was really only one person who we thought fit the bill in all criteria, and that is Professor Sean Murphy. And there was one deficiency that he had, only one that we could find, which is that he is too youthful looking. In fact, as I am taking this handsome brochure around, many people say to me, he's very talented, we see his resume, but surely he is too young to serve on the International Law Commission. To which my response has simply been, he is older than he looks. Old enough to have achieved all of these things, to have developed all of these criteria, and to, we are sure, be willing to serve with a long period of time and with great distinction on the Commission, with great energy and enthusiasm, but nevertheless have the gravitas that only comes with great age. Now, for all of these reasons, we urge those who are considering the question of who to vote for to vote for our candidate on the merits. There are many, many illustrious candidates who are in this election for November. We think that any fair assessment places Sean very, very, very high on that list. We think that to have the U.S. voice back on the Commission will be in service of the Commission's work, in service of international law, will return a great tradition, and help to promote the constructive relationship between the U.S. and the community of international law that this administration has sought to develop. And finally, we think that Sean's membership on the Commission will have a huge effect in terms of educating the international law community of the United States about the challenges that are being faced by the Commission, the developments of international law that the Commission sees a forward-looking approach to international law that brings international law and its projects into the 21st century, so that we're not simply dealing with outdated concepts that are poorly suited to the challenges of today, but an international law that can carry us forward into an era that is not characterized so much by the dominance of states, which is not characterized so much by the dominance of territory, which is not characterized so much by traditional Westphalian concepts, which is not characterized so much by what Louis Henkin called the S word, but what Abe Chase and Antonia Chase called sovereignty, affected by the ability to influence international events. For all of these reasons, we think that an ideal candidate is our candidate, Sean Murphy, and we will be delighted to seek the support of every member of the United Nations, to seek the moral support of every member of the American Society of International Law going forward. And please welcome to the podium our candidate, Sean Murphy.
Thank you very much, Harold and John. Those were wonderful introductions, and I have two general reactions when I hear introductions of that type. One is, who is that guy? And gee, he looks pretty young. And the other is, I wish I brought my mom along for the evening. Indeed, I suspect that she may have written that review that John was referring to. Thank you all very much for coming. It's really a great pleasure and honor to be here and to have you here. My thanks not just to Harold and John, but to Betsy Anderson and the American Society of International Law staff that I know worked hard to put this on. And thank you to the different communities represented here. I think we've got not just the diplomatic community here, but representatives from international organizations, from the private bar. We've got both the executive branch and the congressional branch here, I think. So it's a wonderful constellation of individuals involved in the field of international law, and I think helps reflect some of what Harold was just referring to, which is that it's a field that no longer is purely a state-state system. It's a system that's become much more complex, and that Philip Jessup's term transnational law aptly describes. It's a much deeper realm of law than perhaps it once was. The International Law Commission finished up 3 big projects this summer. For those of you that aren't following its work, it finished the project on responsibility of international organizations, which to a certain extent carries on the work that it did with respect to responsibility of states. Finished up a project on the legal effects of armed conflict on treaties, which will help guide states, tribunals, others, as to how it is treaties continue to remain in force or not when armed conflict breaks out. And I'm reminded some of the proceedings before the Ethiopia-Eritrea Claims Commission, we had that very issue come up. When is it that treaties should be regarded as dropping away in the midst of conflict? And then the third project that they finished up, in addition to responsibility for international organizations and legal effect of armed conflict on treaties, was a very large project on reservations to treaties that weighs in at some 600 guidelines on how it is reservations should operate, and when it is perhaps they would be regarded as impermissible, and if impermissible, when it is perhaps what would be the consequences of that. That is such a large project that my understanding is the translation will take so long that it won't be available for the 6th committee at the UN to consider this fall. It will probably pass over to next year. But I think it highlights that the ILC continues to do some very important, useful work, and that past, that legacy, is something that I very much appreciate and treasure, and is the main reason why I would like to serve on the commission myself. The work, the various topics it's dealt with in the past have been extraordinarily important in both codifying and progressively developing international law, and I think we all owe a great debt to the prior members of the commission, including Mike Matheson, who's here tonight, for all the work that they've done. The commission finished those 3 topics, but they have many more that they're still working on. One important one that I'll mention is the question of immunity for foreign government officials in the courts of a state. That is, when is it a head of state or a head of government or a foreign minister, perhaps others, would have immunities from prosecution for acts that they've committed. Does it matter whether those acts were official acts or non-official acts? Does it matter whether they're still in office or no longer in office? That's a topic the Commission's taken up, which is extraordinarily important and not easy. It's a topic that I think will require the Commission to work very hard to get it right and to do so in cooperation and consultation with governments and non-governmental actors as well. They have also added some new topics to their plate, including the topic of customary international law. I was a bit stunned when I realized the ILC has not, in its prior life, dealt with customary international law as a topic, one of the main sources of international law. And so I think the idea is to sit down and think through some of the core rules that tend to operate in the formation of customary international law, which presumably will take it into things such as when a resolution is issued by an organ like the General Assembly. When might that be evidence of the emergence of a customary rule? Things of that sort. So lots of important work on its plate. I worry when I mention the word plate because I do know we have lots of food here to be eaten. And it probably just whets the appetite even further. But lots of interesting work. And I'd like to be a part of that. I would very much welcome the support of the governments who are here in this room and elsewhere. I've been doing my best to introduce myself to representatives of foreign governments to try to let them know who I am and why I'd like to be on the commission. And let me just conclude by saying something that I have said on other occasions and have said in one-on-one meetings that I've had with governments, which is that, echoing what Harold said, the role of a member of the ILC is as an independent expert. That individual is not the representative of any one government. And while I have spent 12 years in the U.S. Department of State, I've also now spent more than 12 years outside government, and indeed representing a large number of foreign governments. So I've spent a lot of time traveling to foreign capitals, meeting with foreign government officials, learning about their concerns about the realm of international law, either in a particular thing that they're dealing with or more generally. And I do think it's allowed me to get a very broad perspective on the way international law affects countries worldwide and people worldwide, and how it is that the ILC as an institution needs to be representing that polity as a whole, not the individual governments that perhaps are the nationalities of the people on the ILC. The ILC will only succeed in what it does if it is representing the interests of the world as a whole. And so I take that to heart, and if I'm elected, that's the spirit in which I would approach the position. And I would welcome the opportunity to not only talk with governments in the lead up to the election, but to continue that conversation if I'm elected, because I think that's where really the involvement, the interactions can be of the greatest importance for the work of the ILC. So I won't keep you any further from your meal. I do want to recognize one further person in the room, and that is former ICCA Judge Tom Bergenthal. John mentioned that I've co-authored before with Tom, and it's been a great honor for me to do that. But beyond that, he has been a tremendous source of inspiration for me generally in dedicating myself to the field of international law. And when I thought about doing the ILC, I talked with Tom about it and benefited from his advice in whether or not to take it on, and I'm very grateful to him for that. So anyway, let me end.